asked all of our panelists, if you could have a perfect day in Europe, what would it be? And this may be a hypothetical, like if you could kind of construct the perfect day, or it could be an actual perfect day that you've actually experienced in Europe. So I'm going to start things off on the topic, what would be my perfect day in Europe? And my perfect day in Europe is actually a real day that I spent just a few months ago, a couple months ago, on my first trip back to Europe after the pandemic. Of course, my perfect day in Europe has to have the perfect travel partner. My favorite travel partner was my wife, Shauna, and she and I flew over to Slovenia. This was in early September. And we said, you know, if we could go anywhere once the pandemic is kind of ebbing and we feel like it's safe to go back to Europe, if we could go anywhere in Europe, where would we go? And we both agreed we wanted to go to Slovenia. It's just our favorite place. My perfect day, our perfect day, was in the capital of Slovenia, Ljubljana, which is in the foothills of the Alps. It's a very beautiful, low impact, even though it's a capital city, it's only a couple 100,000 people, extremely accessible, fun, easy to spend time in. It just sort of invites you to browse. They've actually stopped all auto traffic in the downtown of Ljubljana, so it's all one big pedestrian zone. So you can just wander up and down the main drag, window shopping and browsing, and you never run out of things to see and do. One of the things I love about Ljubljana is along the river that goes through the middle of town, there's a beautiful embankment that's just jammed with cafe tables, and all hours of the day and night, they're just packed with people out enjoying their beautiful city, sipping coffee, catching up. It's a great place to relax and people watch. We actually met up with some friends of ours from Slovenia. This is Marian and Barbara. This is a husband and wife team. They actually both are tour guides for Rick Steves Tours. They're also old friends of ours. So we had a nice mid-morning coffee break catching up with them. And then another Slovenian friend of ours named Tina Heedy from Lake Bled, when we told her we were coming to Slovenia, she said, I want to take you to some things in Slovenia that you haven't seen before. And that's kind of a tall order because I've been to Slovenia 20, 25 times, and I think I've seen it all, but Tina always finds something new. So she picked us up and we went out to this hill town in the middle of nowhere. And she laid out this great feast of salami and prosciutto and cheeses. And she really wanted us to try the orange wine. This is a Slovenian specialty that goes back hundreds of years, and it's newly trendy again. So it's orange wine or amber wine. So we sat and enjoyed that. And then Tina just enjoyed the rest of the day driving us around this region called the Vipava Valley. If you drive from Ljubljana to Italy, you go right through this little part of Slovenia. It looks very different from the rest of the country. And I'd never really spent time there at all. I just kind of zipped through. And man, it was great having a local person take us around, walk us through different beautiful towns. We stopped at a vineyard and a winery to try some local wine. We went for a hike. It was just an absolutely delightful way to spend a perfect day in Europe, especially after waiting for 2 years to get back there. So that would be my perfect day in Europe. That was my perfect day in Europe. And I think next up, Gabe, you were going to tell us about your perfect day in Europe.
I would love to tell you about my perfect day. My perfect day in Europe would start out in Gothenburg, Sweden, the second city of Sweden. And there's great trams around the whole area. And so I would, right first thing in the morning, it'd be summer, so there'd be lots of sunlight. I'd make the most of it. And I would take the tram out to Lake Delsen, which is about a half hour outside of Gothenburg. And I would go for my morning run around the lake. And I will show you a nice photo of that. And then after my run, I would, depending on how frigid the lake was, I might take a dip. And then to dry myself off on my way back into the city, I would stop at Liseberg, which is a theme park pretty much in the city center of Gothenburg or very near to it. And it's more fair-like that you can kind of pay by ride. And so I would just go for one hop on the roller coaster, get a unique view of the city, dry myself off after my swim. And then I would go to the public park and botanical gardens that I will not attempt to pronounce, but there's great people watching there and some great food stands as well. So I would have a nice little picnic lunch. No perfect day for me in Europe would be complete without a train ride. So I would then hop on the train and I would go from Gothenburg to Stockholm, a nice quick 3.5 hours across the country. I would maybe take a nap or just watch the landscape slide by. And then once I got to Stockholm, I would hop onto a boat and I would do a cruise of the Stockholm archipelago and would probably stop in on one of the islands. and, maybe find a nice cozy crevice in the rock like these folks did right alongside the water, take in the last of the Scandinavian sunlight for the day, and have another little picnic dinner, maybe some berries, some cheese, some baguette. But it would not be complete without a princess tart, the national confection of Sweden. And then I would hop back on the boat. And once I was back on the mainland, I would just wind my way through the capillary alleys of Europe, either through Gamla Stan, the historic core district, or maybe in Södermalm, kind of the new trendier district. And there would be few days better than that for me. So with that, I would love to hear about the perfect day from Lisa. Lisa, what would you do on your perfect day?
Me, oh my goodness. Well, so we talked about this earlier, and whether it was hypothetical or a memory, I have to say that my memory would also include London and Paris, but it would be the day the Seahawks won when we were there a few years ago. But the memory one is a beautiful combination of London and Paris. So let me get my photos up. And get out of Scotland. Here we go. So we start my perfect day with a beautiful English breakfast. Rick also calls this a heart attack on a plate, but it fills you up and keeps you going for our busy morning in London. Then I would head over to Spitalfields Market over in the northeast section of London, and I would peruse the wares, and I would chat up the stall holders as I looked for interesting arts and crafts and local things and vintage stuff. And then I would do something that London is really, really good at. I would go on a walking tour. This is actually a walking tour I took 2 years ago, and it's with a company called London Walks. And this was back streets of the East End, and it was fascinating. But I've been on so many tours with them, and they always are. And then I would jump in a black taxi and go over to St. Pancras Station and take a high-speed nap underneath the channel for 18 minutes before I ended up in Paris. So in Paris, I would be so delighted to go to the Orsay Museum with my train theme continuing, because this is an old train station that has been turned into an art museum. And I would see and enjoy some of the most beautiful Impressionist art before I sat down to a lovely meal with my husband. And we would cap it all off by an evening ride along the Seine, a boat ride along the Seine, and watching the Eiffel Tower light up as it does every hour on the hour after dark. That would be my perfect day in Europe. And who do we hear from next?
I think it's me, Lisa.
Leanne.
Lisa, could you do that in the reverse? Do Paris to London?
You could, but it wouldn't work as well, because you would start with a French breakfast and an English dinner, and it doesn't work quite the same.
That is not the best. No, I understand entirely. Well, Lisa had us in London and Paris. I'm taking us over to Ireland, where I was with my sister in 2016, I believe it was 2017. And this is a day that we did it actually took 2 days to do this, but you could easily do it in one. And we were in this town of Killarney and did a tour of the Gap of Dunloe, which you're seeing now, just this beautiful kind of valley that you can take a tour through, or you can drive through even. But my sister and I were fortunate enough to do the trip on horseback. And so we didn't really expect this. And so when we showed up, our guide, Sean, there in the striped shirt and the beret, he's an Irishman. And he's like, well, we have 2 horses. Who wants to be on the horses? So my sister and I were like, we do. And so there I am, gleefully getting up on this horse. And it was fun talking to Sean. This is also just a perfect day thing, getting to know your tour guide, because he was a sheep shearer, and he was talking about how a lot of the younger people are going out to universities to get higher paying jobs, etc. So it's kind of a dying, a dying skill. So that was interesting to talk to him. But there we are, my sister and I, riding our horses along the Gap of Dunloe, which you could do in the morning on this perfect day. And then in the tour, you end up getting on a boat, and they take you on a lake, through this lake, as the second part of the tour, after a little lunch in this lodge. And I mostly took this picture of my sister to get a picture of the guy in the background, who's this kind of gruff Irishman who didn't really talk that much. That was our boat captain. But also there's a little black blob next to my sister, and that was his dog, who was so cute. And he knew the tour and he knew when we were about to end. So we went up in the bow of the boat and it was really fun. And he said, our guide said it was the most beautiful day they'd had all summer, and it was late September. So we really lucked out there. And after the tour, I would go into the town and take a walk around, which we did. And unfortunately, I lost all my pictures when I went swimming with my phone in my pocket a couple years ago. So I lost my Killarney pictures, but this is a screenshot of the map from above. So you can take a walk and see the St. Mary's Cathedral in town, and then take a walk through this beautiful park, which we just happened upon. And if you're there in late September, you'll be there during deer mating season, which we didn't know either. And so we're just walking along the path, and there's all these herds of deer on either side of the path, like 30 feet away. And then there's these bucks too, with giant antlers running into each other and clacking antlers together. And we were kind of sitting there like, is this safe? But there's people walking their dogs, and it was just a beautiful fall afternoon. So you could just walk along there and see the wildlife just right outside of town. And then come back in, and in the day in a pub for a dinner, where at this time there's just locals there pretty much. And so we sat with some locals, and there's even a young group of men there that sang the famous Irish song Molly Malone. And so we were just blown away at how Irish this day was. But that isn't easily a day that you could do. And it was a very nice time. So it would be my perfect day in Europe. And Ben, you're in Russia right now. What would your perfect day be?
Thank you so much, Julianne. Small town Ireland is really something special. I absolutely loved your perfect day. My perfect day, well, I'm in St. Petersburg, so I think my favorite perfect day in St. Petersburg is not a bad way to go. And it would start with a walk or a run through one of the old imperial parks. They're just absolutely gorgeous. The fountains, the sculptures, they really are special. This one is Letny Sad. Summer Garden. It's one of the oldest in the city. It's from 1704, originally designed by Peter the Great, and that's just 1 year after the city was founded. This picture is just from a couple of weeks ago, in fact. Fall colors at their peak. A few days later, they had all dropped, and it looked very, very different. The next thing I would do is visit one of the palaces of the region. In St. Petersburg, outside of St. Petersburg, there are dozens of palaces. This is the city that became the imperial capital of Russia under Peter the Great and stayed that way until the Russian Revolution. This castle is Peterhof, or palace rather. It's too big for it to be a castle. It's about 30 minutes by hydrofoil. So you can take a nice boat ride, see a bit more of the city, 30 minutes by boat outside of St. Petersburg. And it was a response to Versailles. It's from 18th century as well, from the end of Peter the Great's reign. Really gorgeous. The gardens are just stunning. Definitely worth part of your day in St. Petersburg. And as Cameron mentioned, as Julianne has mentioned, and others too, I think the people you spend time with, that's an important part of a perfect day. And I think some of my favorite people to spend time with are my fellow students here in St. Petersburg, because they each offer a unique perspective. There are students from a variety of countries studying with me, and they each offer a different take on Russia and on St. Petersburg. So we have my friend from England, one from Germany, one from the Netherlands. And this is in front of Palace Square. And of course, this is a lot of walking. The city blocks in St. Petersburg are quite big, even if you're going to take a boat ride to Peterhof and maybe break it up with a taxi or the metro. You still need to get some nourishment. And as you saw before, I actually have another version of this drink. This is Tarhun lemonade. Don't forget it. I would stop and get some Georgian food at one of the many Georgian restaurants. This is barberry lemonade, another version, equally as colorful. And in the evening, I would cap it all off with a performance. I would say, preferably from my perspective, opera. Russian opera is great. Russians love music, culture, theater. This is the old Imperial Theater, Mariinsky, from 1860. It was the home, the debut place of many famous operas and other works by Tchaikovsky and many others. It's absolutely gorgeous theater. And as I said, I would recommend specifically a Russian opera. That would be part of my perfect day, because Russian operas are very colorful. They tend to have very elaborate costumes. The scenes as well are excellent. And I think there might have something to do with the fact that Russian is the native language of the singers, and therefore in Russian operas, they perform particularly well. So this would be the end of my perfect day. And I think that at 10 or 11 o'clock, when the show normally ends, I would just saunter home and ponder everything that I had witnessed through all of these grand buildings and grand experiences. Because, you know, St. Petersburg is over the top, right? It's buildings, its history, its former wealth. It really is just a remarkable place. And through these many experiences, through the different perspectives of my friends, I would hope that I understood it a little bit better. And I hope that the memories would stay with me for a very long time. So this is a little bit about what my perfect day would be in St. Petersburg.